Hello again to Rock Your Mind, where I invite you for yet another, well, in fact, the third dinosaur hunt. A what? Well, just to get everybody on board who has, God forbid, been joining the show late. Dinosaurs in the 21st century are not animals. They are, in fact, discriminating, dangerous patterns of thinking, which in the end all torture people. Dinosaurs, as I said. Last time we explored a very particular dinosaur idea set, the so-called gender dinosaur. This creature uses myths, fairy tales around gender to do exactly this, to torture people. And the one we looked at in particular was the gender dinosaur, who uses ideas around femininity for its purposes. The thing is, there is a lot more to this. In today's dinosaur hunt, for today's show, we will uncover another shocking observation about this creature, the gender dinosaur. We are going to look at how those ancient ideas torture our idea of healthy masculinity. How gender dinosaurs actually torture men. You have heard correctly. In fact, men, or well, let's call them our real-life Kens, are haunted by gender dinosaurs in the very same way that women are suffering from them too, in their Mojo Dojo Casa Houses. Well, I admit that this may need further investigation. Let's find out why men should join this campaign against dinosaurs as well. Ready, set, roar. Well, just like the gender dinosaurs all around the idea of how to be the correct women, which we again heard a lot about last time, dinosaurs have a lot to say on how men should be, how the correct man is supposed to look like, and so on and so forth. While there is, of course, always room for everything, this includes a lot of positive ideas around masculinity, let me assure you one thing. Dinosaur expectations on men are as dangerous, persistent, and outdated as they are for women. Sadly. The actual question is, do you want to see it? Especially as a man. Have you, for instance, ever asked yourself, when is a man in your eyes? For probably many men out there, and women too, I guess, the 2017 Man Box report by Unilever and Equimundo could provide something, like a good outline of the reality we are confronted with daily. Well, the man box is basically a set or a construct of, let's call it, cultural ideas of male identity. What it means to be a man. Attitudes, behaviors, and certain understandings of manhood, which were, by the way, all mentioned during a research experiment amongst randomly picked people, young men, in the UK, US, and Mexico. Well, so what is considered masculine in that experiment? Everything and dinosaurs. When reading this list for the first time, I could literally hear it roaring from the get-go. From rather harmless stuff, including things like man gotta be self-sufficient, and man gotta be hot and fit, you'll also find a lot of more concerning stuff there. Things such as man gotta be adhering to rigid gender roles in relationships, or something as concerning actually as man gotta be using aggression to resolve conflicts. Ouch. We do agree, right, that this is or could be discriminating. Wait, dinosaur, don't we? Wow. So this is the state of manhood those days. This is expected to be a real man. Is this also what you identify as typically male? While this may differ for different age brackets, different cultural contexts, and of course, depending on your social status, I'm very certain that everybody somehow relate to this, set of ideas. Shocking as it is, especially for subconsciously thriving, unnoticed dinosaur patterns. However, as always, let's critically question everything. Let's dive deeper and ask the question, what is the state of manhood those days? When is a man a man? So, what did I find out when digging deeper into this topic? Well, while there are, of course, obvious areas and men where the following won't apply, I want to highlight how deeply ingrained dinosaur thinking around men actually still is in the 21st century. And that's what I consider super concerning. I also think it is very often strangely glorified by society, consciously and unconsciously. Yeah. I didn't need to actually dig deep to find areas full of interesting dinosaur expectations. When is a man a man? Not that good research always starts with this, but, have you ever asked in online forums for a proper response to this question? Or simply Googled into that matter? So I did. And I couldn't help but frown when I read into some online prescriptions, let's call it like that, that followed. Oh, ha. While there may be, again, some truth in literally everything, for sure, and you can learn from generally everything. I, for instance, severely doubt whether some of those, let's call it dinosaur myths of YouTube influencers, for instance, whether they are actually helpful. Do you want to know what they say? From tips how to be strong enough, from your so-called alpha male bros, to their brother from another mother, to something as interesting as step-by-step manuals for men to get the, let me quote this, hot girls in hookup forums, to, rather concerning relationship advice, which frames your woman, as your property and your property alone. Yeah. You will find some quite disturbing dinosaur ideas out there. Ouch. Well, as in the case of female dinosaurs, I will be reflecting on this a lot more in anonymous dinosaur victim groups later. And that's exactly the reason why I have to be so short now when exploring my two favorite dinosaurs around masculinity, which I encountered there as well. Let's go. A still very common gender dinosaur amongst us often subconsciously imposes an ideal how a real man has to look like. In many articles, blog entries, etc., they often use the term male enough. Physically strong, sexually capable, and not seldomly conveying a certain sense of power. Through, a steel body as well as proper clothes. Both is important. Have you ever encountered that one? I tell you, sometimes you don't know you do. Because this buddy, this dinosaur boy, is often disguised as, actually pretty outdated social norms. And what's even worse about this, it is very often even promoted by something as treacherous as ever-present group dynamics. But maybe a real-life example makes this whole dinosaur thing a bit more tangible. And also, to what dinosaur extent men might feel insecure about being seen not in the correct light, not being seen masculine enough. Do you remember my little bedtime story from the football pitch last time? The one about the inspiring female referee. Well, here goes another one from the football pitch. When I was involved more in football, I was also in charge of a team of whom some team members, all male, all adults, by the way, profoundly, and I want to highlight profoundly, despised the idea of wearing a black sports kit. The thing is that due to whatever reason, this black sports kid highlighted their muscles and body features more than the usually very baggy suits. In their eyes, however, that was looking way too feminine. And I remember some of them coming towards me and telling me that this made them look, quote, so gay. Dressed like this, they could simply not enter the pitch. The main reason for them not to want to do this was because of what their friends outside of the pitch would say, the ones who were watching. I was like, what? I mean, I didn't ask them to go out and, play in pink high heels and win that match, right? I thought I was in the wrong kind of dinosaur movie. We ended up, of course, playing in those shirts, but still, an interesting observation, isn't it? While everyone is entitled and, should have their own style of clothes, oh my god. A rather stupid dinosaur joke like this is actually quite insulting towards women, but especially gay people, isn't it? Towards gay female people who might, by the way, be excellent football players, such as Lara Dickenman or, I don't know, Megan Rapinoe. You might need better excuses, because people who say dash think that obviously didn't do their research well. Anyway, have you ever faced similar dinosaurs when it comes to clothes? Or the way a man seemingly needs to look? Probably yes. But the thing is that one often doesn't know that this let's look male enough, according to societal standards, that it actually plays with us subconsciously. Let's ponder on another example, which is actually a lot more serious than also men I know want to admit. According to the dinosaur box, a real man must be active, strong, and whatnot. While it is beautiful, to be healthy and strong and, to feel simply good about yourself, there is a certain dinosaur problem with building the wrong kind of self-confidence around this whole thing. Have you ever heard about toxic masculinity, which somehow glorifies gym bros to be more than they actually are? Toxic masculinity, which pushes, a certain kind of self-confidence, a wrong kind of self-confidence in men. I would argue a real man loves his body, no matter how he actually looks like. I may be wrong, but I actually don't think I am. A real man nurtures his body. He shows respect to himself, and that's why he gets fit. The thing is that in a dinosaur reality, we often glorify the perfect male body. We glorify strength and, sports per se. In a way beyond good and evil, if you check what kind of sometimes toxic content influencers such as Andrew Tate, etc., get hyped for, what kind of content they actually get admired for. Have you ever asked yourself which maybe dinosaur reasons you may do sports for? To impress, to fit in, to seem strong, maybe to prove you fit a certain ideal enough? I always wonder why someone gets fit in the first place when I, see them posting gym selfies in my IG reels. I have barely seen, if at all, beer belly selfies, which people always try to, Photoshop away, don't they? Have you? I mean, that's also masculine, isn't it? But, and that's the key point, not as accepted, as glorified within a dinosaur reality. Okay, beer belly jokes aside, yeah? But this game which dinosaur ideas play with the self-confidence of, again, particularly men, based on how you look, this can be so dangerous. Especially if it does the opposite as outlined before, if it undermines your self-confidence. If it makes you as a man, for instance, do things which are not good for yourself. Have you ever heard of let's call it a particularly bizarre dinosaur, bigorexia? This is, by the way, a real condition. Yeah, you can find that in a conservative dictionary. So, what is bigorexia? Bigorexia is basically a dinosaur idea which chases people to be active and to eat in a way that is often causing major physical as well as mental damage. Why? Well, because the people who do actually suffer from bigorexia, they do not feel muscular enough. A necessary male quality, in a dinosaur reality. Yeah. While I try to frame this in a dinosaur manner here, this is, in fact, a dead serious matter. We're talking about serious eating disorder, suicidal thoughts of young people, and something which is actually a lot more common than you may think. According to a study in 2019, around 1 in 5 adolescent men in the US, this means around 22%, engage in such, let's say, dinosaur activity, which is, by the way, sometimes also disguised as healthy habits. From eating more or less for dietary reasons, from bulking up, or again, using supplements and steroids for the wrong kind of reasons. I would argue you don't need to go to that extreme, and be suffering from that exact dinosaur. Have you ever asked yourself how far your eating habits, let's say the way you also care for your health, your body, how far this may be manipulated by dinosaur ideas? Or, that's a tricky one again, whether you're always aware of this. How can we allow dinosaur ideas, again, which we're all somehow suffering from, How can we have those dinosaur ideas make us engage in maybe even hurtful behavior? Think about the tremendous amount of power which dinosaurs around masculinity hold. Even over other genders, to be honest. Because if you're not a man, but see or judge men through a dinosaur lens, you're exactly the same. Yes, you have heard correctly. Women and any other gender, too, suffer from that dinosaur when perceiving men through a dinosaur lens, don't they? Dinosaur myth number 2. Men must behave a certain way. Besides proper masculine looks, there is a major dinosaur area, which I want to touch on today. The, way gender dinosaurs love to plant interesting ideas of how men shall behave. In any kind of interpersonal relationship, by the way. Based on the dinosaur fairy tale, that men have to be perceived as tough, as strong, an eminent dinosaur authority actually manipulates people into thinking that the idea of manliness is closely linked to domination. Sometimes even to aggression, in whatever often more, subtle form this may be. Sometimes domination or control isn't so obvious. Let me give you, sort of a funny example, which occurred to me when I was out and about with friends of mine in Hong Kong, on a typical Saturday evening. We were standing outside of a bar on a hill, and there was actually a group of friends next to us. And, somehow I dropped into that conversation. If you do that as a woman, that alone can be an alarming sign for certain, dinosaurs around masculinity. But, bear with me. That's not what I'm trying to get at. What I realized during this conversation with 3 of the guys was that the fourth felt really uncomfortable around me. Maybe because I was taller or because I had initiated the conversation. Especially, when I suddenly started to speak Spanish with one of the guys who used to live in Colombia, I realized that he felt completely overwhelmed. During the conversation, I literally saw how he moved up the hill where we were standing in order to, maybe seem taller than me. While we had a very funny conversation, he actually had to suddenly excuse himself. The thing is that he had a pretty dinosaur accent, by commenting that move with something along the lines, quote, I as a woman, so me as a woman, I may need a very docile man to basically take care of me. That someone needed to teach me, how to behave around men, not to talk so much, to tame me, to better not be so outgoing towards men. Imagine someone said that to you on a random Saturday evening. Great vibes. A round of sunburned, relaxed people coming from a random beach in beautiful Hong Kong. I didn't know what to do, so I laughed. And by the way, not just me, but his friends too. Does this happen to you too? Or is this just me on my dinosaur hunts? Well, let's not overinterpret this situation, yeah? But for him, I guess, the idea of a woman being so outspoken, maybe even without any further thoughts, approaching a group of guys was just outrageous. He literally called me a dragon woman. I tried not to feel offended, but I was wondering what subconscious dinosaur in the 21st century did I just trigger? This surely said a lot more about him than it said about me. Well, maybe I am a dragon lady. Who knows, huh? Have you ever had situations such as this where you felt that the sort of interaction was not naturally harmonious? Due to probably the same, gender propaganda? Where you felt triggered because something, just does not want to fit your dinosaur image of how a man should behave or a role he is supposed to play. By the way, this can also happen if you're not a man, but if you think that a man is supposed to act a certain way, discriminating or tough or strong, you never know. A rather innocent example for this is if you sort of, expect that your boyfriend is supposed to always make the first move. Because, real men, they do that. Men are often as afraid of making those as women could be. Well, we're not going to dive too deep into this again because I will have another amazing anti-dinosaur campaigner with me to do that in a later episode. But have you ever thought how, this can affect your romantic relationships? I mean, catchwords such as control, such as domination or aggression, they don't seem to be the best ingredients for a healthy love life per definition. Especially socially accepted subtle undercover forms. A study published by the Journal of Personality and Society in 2013 showed exactly this. Have you ever wondered how the success of, let's say, a female partner makes you feel, or generally a female? When analyzing how men in heterosexual relationships reacted towards their female partners when they have success, men showed to automatically interpret their female partner's success as their own failure. Even, and that's really funny actually, when they're not in direct competition or when we're talking about something as random as losing weight. Tell me again that this is not an issue in a dinosaur reality. The fact that other studies in Europe show that a man's life quality is actually suffering because of dinosaur ideas within society, when their woman, is perceived as the main breadwinner and so on and so forth, that fact alone speaks for itself, doesn't it? Anyway, while dinosaur ideas around how to behave like a proper man may interfere with a lot of relationships with other people, outside, this whole thing around dinosaurs about being tough, being strong and whatnot, this whole thing actually particularly works against men themselves. Again, I gotta be short on this because we're gonna talk about this in later episodes. But let me give you a pretty simple example of how absolutely toxic ideas around sexuality play with man's confidence. In his 2013 TED Talk, the former NFL star Joe Ehrman talks about exactly the same issue. He talks about dinosaurs around manhood. And he also speaks about how dinosaur expectations on the sexual conquest, the conquest culture, are instilled in men from sometimes as early as elementary school. On one hand, men thus often subconsciously suffer from low confidence, because, for instance, they are simply not able to seduce a woman, the way a strong, a tough man should be able to, They may see a rejection for whatever private reason as undermining their value as a man in a dinosaur reality. On the other hand, this whole dinosaur game, the whole dinosaur fairy tale, it plays with man's confidence also the other way around. Based on dinosaur ideas, for instance, the game can also artificially make really successful man's confidence skyrocket. Don't get me wrong, but I sometimes doubt whether this, in our culture, is always healthy only. Have you just caught yourself smiling to yourself? Probably relieved, because you are definitely not that type of dinosaur. Wait and see. This dinosaur thinking, which I was just outlining, it doesn't always need to go to this extreme, but it can be more subtle. Let's call it domesticated, okay? It can make men question, for instance, whether it is okay to show emotions or to cry in public. Google this again. You may be quite busy reading through internet forums full of debates around exactly this issue. Doesn't this show how detrimental those ancient ideas around, being strong and being vulnerable, on the other hand, can be for men? Men have to process the very same emotions as everybody else. But it seems to be a dinosaur issue if they do it publicly. Is it not an alarming sign indicating how successful, how powerful some of those gendered dinosaurs can operate if, let's say, well-known newspapers such as the Irish Times, if they have to advertise, if they have to advise men to keep crying in public? Or, if a sportsman such as Jason Kelce made it into the opinion section of the New York Times? Why? Well, because he cried in public when retiring. What is this? Why on earth is this such an issue? But, the actually more uncomfortable question may be, have you experienced that for yourself? Have you ever adjusted your behavior to such ideas? I mean, your emotional behavior, right? The thing is that similarly to women who are adjusting to often unhelpful ideas around femininity, we speak less, we talk more silent, we dress differently. Dinosaur expectations, consciously or unconsciously, invite men to do the exact same thing. So, in a dinosaur reality, you don't cry in public. Maybe not even in private, You get your act together. And you better don't get caught when acting differently, or, dinosaurs forbid, when you ask for help. Why on earth not? Especially if you love yourself and you just want to be whoever you want to be, with presumably good intentions, okay? Have you ever wondered which things you do not feel comfortable with in public, especially maybe because you may feel judged as a man? Or, whether you actually as a person judge men for being different men? Well, when is a man again? So, when is a man for you? I guess that's worth pondering on, because manhood seems to be in a major crisis those days. Maybe, however, there is no such thing as a single answer from the get-go, Maybe it's rather about something like a guiding principle that we can all agree upon. I want to line up, for me, with what previously mentioned Der Ehrman stated in his 2013 TED Talk. He concluded that no matter how you define a man, it must in the end all come down to the question whether he, as a manly man, really made the world a better place or not. Beautiful. And also the perfect ending of such a thought-provoking episode. So stay tuned and see you soon.